between caregiving, which has taken a huge part of my time and life in the last few years, it was like, well, who am I? And I think your idea about creativity found not having to be just art. It's being creative in some way, shape, or form. Cooking, gardening, home decorating. You and I know this is a conversation we've had before, but it's like this need for creativity seems to rise up very strong in these midlife years. And that's what I've seen a consistent pattern in. So both of my girls really were the wind beneath my painting wings because they knew I wanted to. So they were the ones that really were the catalyst to encouraging me, because I had encouraged them all through homeschooling, and they were both painting and drawing and doing all these things, and I was on the sidelines living vicariously through those specific creative endeavors. So they were like, okay, enough, time for you. Try the different things to see what lights you up, and it might light you up for 5 years, and then you might move on to something else, and it's fine. It doesn't have to be forever.
Hi, I'm Claire, founder of Creativity Found, a community for creative learners and educators, connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them do so, with workshops, courses, online events and kits. For this podcast, I chat with people who have found or refound their creativity as adults. We'll explore their childhood experiences of the arts, discuss how they came to the artistic practices they now love, and consider the barriers they may have experienced between the two. We'll also explore what it is that people value and gain from their newfound artistic pursuits, and how their creative lives enrich their practical, necessary, everyday lives. For this episode, I'm chatting with Gina Farrar about, among other things, disparaging comments, homeschooling, and the complexities of transferring a two-dimensional design to the curvy, intricate, and moving canvas of a human body. Hi, Gina. How are you?
I'm doing well, Claire. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you. Start by telling me what the creative activities that you like to do now are.
Well, I happen to be what they call a multi-passionate creative. I love being in all the things. So right now, I am making journals and books. I've gotten into bookmaking, which is, I love it. I've always been a journal person. Like I love journals and papers and pens. I watercolor and I use acrylic as well. And with the acrylic, I use palette knives over paintbrushes typically. So I'm a palette knife painter with acrylic, and then I have my watercolor, and then I have my bookmaking. Right now, I'm really loving paper. You know what I mean? Like making things with paper, trying new book cover papers and different kind of fabric papers, kind of digging deep into my paper passion at the moment.
It's quite key, actually, because we're going to talk a bit later about other surfaces that you've worked on before you allowed yourself back to paper. But let's start with when you were younger. Were creative activities an important part of your younger years? Were you encouraged that way at home, at school?
You know, that's a great question about being encouraged. I don't remember being necessarily encouraged or discouraged. I was raised by a single mom. She was pretty busy. But as far as what I love to do in elementary school, I played the violin for 3 years. And when I hit junior high, I got involved in singing, which circled back in my life later. But in high school, I was a cheerleader. And one of the things we did we would make posters for around campus. And I really enjoyed painting the posters and doing the lettering. They weren't drawings, they were lettering. And so I ended up being kind of like the person that got to letter them because everybody said I did such a good job. And I really enjoyed creating the lettering on paper, of course, with paint. And then I cheered in college, which is creative because you're creating routines and things like that. You're using your body to be creative, which I absolutely loved. And then I got back into singing again. I was leading worship. I eventually got involved in a gospel choir after I got married. So I used to sing at weddings. You know, I sang for all my friends' weddings. And then I got into makeup. And that's probably where you want to ask my next question.
Yeah, well, I'm going to come back to that a bit later because you told me previously about an unfortunate situation that kind of knocked your
Mm,
confidence with art and paper.
yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so, you know, it's really interesting. The different seasons of our life where we're at mentally and emotionally, we can sometimes misinterpret things if we're not in the right frame of mind. And when I was in junior high, I was taking an art class and we were painting a sunset on a paper plate. So it was like a sunset and an ocean. So you had the ripples with the light. And at that season of my life, there was some really challenging things going on at home. And so in my literally like late 40s, early 50s, probably my early 50s, I realized the connection between why I violently reacted to this art teacher who may not have put it the way I thought they did. But I did get a poor grade on that, and I was criticized for how unrealistic it was. And so at that time, I was like a sea urchin. I had gotten poked and I just closed up and thought that I couldn't do traditional art. And that's why I think I moved into moving my body, using my voice, that sort of thing.
It's not an uncommon story. I have certainly heard it from other guests, those kind of reactions. As you say, in that season, or for them, it may be different seasons, but often it's a comment from somebody else that then takes you, however they meant it or not, takes you in a certain direction. It's a shame, but it does, yeah, it does come up quite a lot. I hear from a lot of my American guests about going to college. You went to college for the general education bit, but not the degree. Was there a reason for that? What were you planning on doing next?
So for me, my philosophy is very probably anti-American, not against the country, but against the philosophy of education, which is everybody does this, everybody does that, and then you do this. And I was like, that doesn't fit me. For me, I did go to college because that was, what was I going to do? Well, I'll go to junior college. Here in America, we have what we call a junior college or a community college. It's a 2-year college. You kind of get your general education out of the way. It's a good, less expensive way to take care of things while you decide what's next. Most people do their 2 years at junior college, community college, and then they go to university. And if they do it right, they'll have 2 to 3 years, depending, at university. So it's a little less expensive. Well, I had never intended to go to university because there was nothing in the world that was inspiring me to go into debt. University is quite expensive. So I went, got my general ed. I was there 3 years because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I still followed the path in case. I played some volleyball, did some swimming, did cheerleading, and then I did all of my classes. But I did not, outside of calligraphy, which I really enjoyed, I did not take any other art classes.
Hmm. And there wasn't a urge to do something specific, to go into a particular field?
No, it's so funny. When you get near the end of your schooling years, everybody asks you what you want to do for the rest of your life. And it was like, I still feel like, I don't know the full answer to that question. But I wanted to be a wife and a mother. For me, that traditional route was something that I really wanted to experience. So once I finished junior college, I mean, I was working during the time. I worked until my husband, we were dating at the time, until we got married. And then I happened to get pregnant the first month I was married. So I went from working to stay-at-home mom much quicker than we had planned. But what's interesting about that is it gave me the opportunity at home. Like I painted furniture and I put stencils on the wall and I did all of these creative things in my home.
You homeschooled
Yes.
your girls. Again, had you always planned to homeschool?
The shortest way to tell this story is, yes, I was interested in it because I had family members ahead of me that were older than me that had homeschooled their children. So they had talked to me about it. So once I had my children, I thought I would love to homeschool my girls. And in the process of homeschooling, I kept directing them toward art. I got these great art curriculums, and we would go to museums and we would do things so that I would always give them the opportunity to express themselves through creativity, whether it was drawing or painting or creating bracelets or cooking or sewing. Like, creativity was a huge part of my homeschooling for my girls. I wanted them to be very well rounded and have the skills to be able to do all the things. Like, I taught them to make bread. They've made their own quilts, that sort of thing. So creativity has been a through line in everything that I do. It's just the way that I look at the world. I'm the kind of person who's like, look at the color of that flower, look at the shape of that cloud, So I raised my girls with that same aesthetic. And actually, they're both artists who have sold their work to different people. So it carried through.
Yeah, brilliant. And did you find you were able to, or perhaps needed to, use different teaching methods, or you were able to focus more on your individual child and how they learned best and adapt to that, where maybe, conventional school wouldn't be able to?
I'm a huge proponent of homeschooling because of the fact that the way that we each learn is so different. Some of us are kinesthetics, some of us are audio learners, some of us are visual learners. I had the opportunity to empower my oldest daughter because we were having difficulty with getting from her mind to the paper. Like, she's really high in language arts, but that one skill, she felt the need to have it perfect when it came out of her head, right? And so the creativity that it took us to navigate that and to find a pathway for her that felt free. And so that particular experience of helping her navigate how to write, to get it from her head to the paper, even a simple thing like a book report, was a lot of pressure for her. Once we figured that out, that particular process became a tool that she used when she went to college, and she went through the art program at the community college. We have one of the top rated community colleges near us. She got compliments from the teacher on this process. And that process came directly from that homeschool experience where she struggled with writing. So my daughters were very different in the way they used their bodies as they learned. One was very still, one was very active, one was very kinesthetic, one was very, I need the room quiet, I need everything calm, that sort of a thing. So the creative journey of homeschooling was so rewarding and enriching, and it taught me a lot about how we think. And it gave us the opportunity, if you will, to be creative in our solutions that were suited to each of my children so that they could be set free to do the things that they were good at. So that was really a really powerful season of my life anyway. And my oldest daughter and I have had many, many conversations about how that process has empowered her and how she's in her 30s. And that process is still right there in the background, helping her when she does her art or when she does her tattooing, because she's also multi-passionate. So she's moved into taking her own art into tattooing. And of course, she's really good at it. So
well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's the body as a canvas. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about now, and about the makeup. And it goes further than just makeup. So do explain everything to me.
I got into makeup before I got married. So I was in the cosmetic, really actively doing makeup for over 30 years. And I got involved with a company that really got into the artistic side of makeup. Makeup is art, but then there's that other level where you get to take the makeup to the next level. You get to do something creative on the face and on the body. So I got to experience body painting, which I really enjoyed. Like, one time we had an event where different teams from the different stores, they got chosen and we got to do body painting. And this particular body paint was like a 60s flower power child kind of thing. So we have this lovely model. All she's wearing is little pasties and a little thong. And so we have an entire canvas to paint. And the design was on a flat piece of paper with these flowers and these curves. But as they went to put it on the body, the people that I was with were like, oh, I don't know if this looks right. And so my ability to contribute to that in the creative process was me physically working through how to make this flower fit on a curvy canvas, instead of a flat canvas, because now you've got a waistline and a bum and an armpit. That was something that inspired me to go, oh, this flower petal, it looks really weird there. You have to widen this petal, or you have to lower this. And so I ended up contributing to that body painting really heavily in the creative solutions to where to put this thing on a curvy woman's body. And then, of course, we fully painted it, and it turned out fantastic. But I really found that I loved that type of creativity and that type of creative solving. So yeah, body painting is something I got into that is really a lot of fun.
Yeah. And did you get to do other kind of projects like that? Did that kind of develop?
I only did it, I would say, 2 or 3 times. But the fun thing about body painting is that you've got this physical canvas that moves. So the art isn't static. They move their body. You're like, oh, that looks really cool. Or, oh, no, that looks really strange. So one of the other things I did is I worked at a pro store, and I ran some workshops for the employees where I taught them how to take, they were called acrylics, but they were body painting acrylics, not the acrylics that we paint on paper. So they're slightly different, but they came in primary colors. And I had been playing with them and figuring out, can I make skin tone with these primary colors? So I did end up making skin tone. And then I decided, I bet I could teach this to my fellow artists. And so we did a workshop. We called it a play workshop, where I had everyone play with the same colors. And these are people with dark skin, people with fair skin, and everybody in between, and taught them how to create their own skin tone with these primary colors. And that was a lot of fun to take color theory and apply it. Because as an artist, you might say, we think of peach and white as skin tone, but there's a little bit of blue in there, and could even be green, depending on what part of the world you come from. There's a green undertone to some people's skin. And as a makeup artist, matching people's foundation was part of that mental process of looking at someone's skin and understanding, are they warm? Are they cool? Oh, do they have a green undertone, which is a very rare thing, but there are those people. Like, there's just a few people that don't fit the common foundation colors. And so it kind of inspired me to really think about color outside of the box.
Yeah. And I struggle with it. But it helped when I did a jigsaw puzzle once, actually, to see, because you're looking at the small pieces and then you start to see all the different colours in it. But to see the different colours in something, for example, you think is a sky blue, but the sky isn't just sky blue. It's got all these other things in it. But it's recognising that and seeing that and then being able to replicate it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting and clever and fun. And maybe even frustrating.
It can be frustrating, especially in makeup. I mean, it's a side note, but most people want one product. But as a veteran makeup artist, the reality is that for a lot of people, one color is not going to work. You can get close, but our skin has so much going on. So it was interesting to be like, well, these 3 products will get you to the natural look. Well, I don't want 3 products. I understand that. So that's when I really realized my artistic heart was really being stirred with color. Color became the thing I became known for. Color is somewhat intuitive for me. I found that the gift of being a makeup artist was really in the understanding and the application of color. That was really helpful for me.
So I want to know then 2 things from that. First is, was there a catalyst that told you that you could start painting on paper again, where you'd been discouraged a bit at school? And also, you must have experienced then what you could do more easily because of all the colour knowledge that you already had. And were you able to replicate that when you started to work on paper? Or flat surface, whether it's paper or not?
Right. I feel like when it comes to the art piece, I think I had dabbled on and off, right? I had dipped my toe in because my heart wanted to paint. I wanted to paint on paper or canvas. My grandmother was a painter. She used oils. In my grandparents' house, at the end of the living room was a full wall mural of a field of daisies with a blue sky behind it, like wild daisies. and then paintings in the hallway and in the kitchen. So I grew up looking at painting, knowing that my grandmother was a painter. And I have a cousin who's very artistic and she had gotten into painting. And so art was a conversation, if you will. It was present in my life. She didn't necessarily encourage me to paint or anything or teach me, but knowing and seeing her painting was always there for me. So when it came to having my own home and finding ways to decorate, I was always drawn to figuring out how to do art, but I was so broken from that season of my life in junior high and what I perceived the teacher meant that it wasn't until way later when I was working for that cosmetic company. We were having these huge events and they were massive and so popular. Just hundreds and hundreds of people would come. And so to inspire the team, we would theme the bathroom. And I had gotten that opportunity. So we got like pillow stuffing and we stretched it out and we spray painted it with blues and pinks to match the launch, which had candy colored skies. And so my family's out in the front yard. We're spray painting this pillow stuffing. And then I go and I hang it in the bathroom and we're creating vision boards and we're creating, so I was painting and creating to some degree. Sometimes I would do like not a mural, but it would be on paper so we could hang it up in the bathroom. So it's a silly thing, but I would literally make a mini event visual for the bathroom. And I did this like 4 times, I think. And people would be like, oh my gosh, they'd come to our store and go, this bathroom's amazing. And it made me start thinking, hey, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I can reach out a little bit more. And so through that, I started playing with watercolor because I've always wanted a watercolor. I know a lot of people say watercolor, they don't like it because it's not controllable, but I'm the person that loves that unpredictability of watercolor. So I was playing with it. So I would say 2014 is when I really started allowing myself, because my daughter, Amber, she bought me some paints and she was like, here, do this. And my other daughter's like, Mom, both of my girls were like, you need to paint, like just stop thinking about it and make it happen. So both of my girls really were the wind beneath my painting wings because they knew I wanted to. So they were the ones that really were the catalyst to encouraging me, because I had encouraged them all through homeschooling and they were both painting and drawing and doing all these things. And I was on the sidelines living vicariously through those specific creative endeavors. So they were like, okay, enough, time for you.
That's lovely. Did you find it difficult with regards to like what you wanted to produce, or was it all coming from somewhere in the mind it just came out, or did you have specific ideas of what you wanted to do?
That's a great question. I think there's a perception that if you're an artist, it's in your head and it goes from your head to the paper or your head to the canvas. But what I learned is many artists have something that they're inspired by. They have a photo or 2 or 3 photos. So I had to learn that expectation that I would just have it in me and it would just come out would be the way it would be. So I basically duplicated a lot of other people's art to kind of figure out what it was that I liked. I found that my patience was a little bit of an issue with watercolor. I love painting with a palette knife with acrylics. I don't wait for one surface to dry. I'm creating on top of layers of paint. So there's lots of things going on. And I love that dance between the colors and the texture. And so with watercolor, I found that what I wanted was harder to achieve because you had to be patient. So for me, the transition was less about the surface than what it was with how you manipulated the medium that you were using to get the result that was like in my head. And then understanding that I don't have to come up with it in my head, that it's totally acceptable and completely normal. I mean, thanks to YouTube, you've got all these people who are so gifted and they're telling you, why do you have to come up with it in your head? That's not the way I do it, and you're like, oh, okay. You begin to realize that you take inspiration from something. You may not duplicate the scene exactly as you see it, but you're getting something from the world around you to create it. So for me, the process was less about the paper or the canvas and more about how I wanted to move the medium on it to express what I was kind of feeling, I guess is the best way I know how to explain it.
Yeah, that explains it brilliantly. Tell me a bit about your podcast, Feminine Roadmap. How and why did that come about?
I jumped in on the midlife podcast train early. Now they're everywhere. But at the time, I had been the keynote speaker for a couple of things. I had been the main speaker for women's retreats, and I love speaking. But the challenge is you have to wait for a platform, right? You have to look for the opportunity to be able to share what's on your mind. So I thought, well, if I had a podcast, then I could just talk about whatever strikes me. And this whole midlife conversation was kind of important to me because, let's see, I'm 56. So I was like 50. I think I was 50 when I started the podcast, and there wasn't a lot out there for midlife women. And everything was like, anti-aging or menopause. Like these were the only things that you could see if you Googled midlife women. And I thought, gosh, midlife is so much more than that. Our bodies and our minds were so much more than the physical expression of who we are. And so I thought, I'm gonna start a podcast. And so it covered the desire to talk and share and creating my own platform, and then this topic of midlife, which seemed really important to me. So I had a partner when I started. She was never meant to stay. She was just like, so I could show up. Once I got in the habit of showing up, she moved on. And so I just finished my 6th year. And so I really got into interviewing people. We had kind of started interviewing people toward the end of the time with her. I got highlighted in a popular magazine here, and that kind of set me off on the PR train. So I've been able to find fantastic guests. When I found you for my podcast, you came through a promotion on podcastguest.com. So I've had different venues come along where I could find really good guests for my show. For me as a creative, I had to learn to record and edit and do all the things. And at the time, what we're doing today didn't exist. The one-stop shop. That is also a creative process because I had to learn all of these editing tools and sound things and, oh my goodness, stuff I never thought that I would be able to do. And here I've been able to encourage other people to start podcasts, and they have, using the resources that I use to start mine. So it is a creative process. Plus it's very satisfying. I've been able to talk about everything. And I found a lot of women have been encouraged by topics that they think about. But, like I said, now the market's getting flooded with midlife people. So there's a lot more resources now than when I started.
Yeah, and I think that has really happened, certainly here in the UK, only in the last, 2 or 3 years. And it's done it quite quickly, to be fair. The growth in seeing that, people talking about that has been exponential in that short time. This understanding that, like you say, it's not just one thing or the other, or you do this, then you go through the menopause, then you're old.
Right. Well, and then the fact that we're multifaceted humans, and aging is one piece of who we are. It's not the definition of who I am, but the cultural narrative is you reach a certain point and now you're irrelevant. But you see, that's where I think, Claire, you and I would agree that we find a lot of women, maybe men, but because I focus on women on my podcast, I tend to just talk about women. We have this desire to create something, right? Many, many women step into these really creative opportunities in midlife and beyond because they're trying to figure something out. And so this creativity that you talk about, that creativity found is a huge conversation in midlife. For me, being a wife and a mother and a homeschooler was my dream job. I loved it. I'm not saying it was easy, but I'm saying I look back on those years and think those were the years that I loved it. I coached my girls in sports. We were involved in so many things, and it was such a joy. And then, of course, that job comes to, not the wife part, but the parenting and the homeschooling came to an end. And then I had to figure myself out a little bit, and I think midlife is another opportunity. I ended parenting earlier than some people do. Some people in my age group still have kids in elementary, junior high, and high school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my girls are adults doing their thing. So it was like, what do I want to do? Between caregiving, which has taken a huge part of my time and life in the last few years, it was like, well, who am I? And I think your idea about creativity found not having to be just art. It's being creative in some way, shape, or form. Cooking, gardening, home decorating. You and I know this is a conversation we've had before, but it's like this need for creativity seems to rise up very strong in these midlife years. And that's what I've seen a consistent pattern in.
And I think the beauty of you and I with our shows and other people with shows is to show that you can do it. And we've talked about this before, about it doesn't matter if you don't like what you do or you try something else. It's this idea that you don't have to choose something and stick with it forever because you've chosen it, or even because you're good at it. You might be very, very good at your job or something you've learned, but you don't actually like doing it. That doesn't mean you have to do it. You know, it's that encouraging that idea that you can do some things, do some other things, change around a bit, try something else.
It's like we get this idea somewhere. We have to have all the answers. You get out of high school. What are you going to do? I don't know. I feel like that question has never completely been answered. Like it's not a one and done kind of thing. And I think if I could tap into the word creativity, that's the point. We've been creative all along and trying to solve problems, you know, working through relationship issues, working through life issues and this sort of thing. So creativity, while I like to focus on the art side of it, because that's the part that drives my heart and life, I can't help myself, is what ways are we able to be creative that bring us joy? You know, some people become coaches because they're able to be creative and problem solving for other people. I'm getting into sourdough baking. I had tried it during quarantine, but I couldn't find the good flour and it didn't work with the yucky flour. So I gave it up. But now it's back and it's like, these are creative expressions. I don't have to do it forever, to your point. But if I try it once, I find out whether or not I like it. And I think that's an important thing that you mentioned, Claire, is that curiosity about what could I do? What if I tried it? It's not the end of the world if you don't like it. It's not like at the beginning when you're 18, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? Now we get to say, well, I've done all that. It's time to go to the playground of life and just try the different things to see what lights you up. And it might light you up for 5 years and then you might move on to something else and it's fine. It doesn't have to be forever. I think we need to remove that expectation that you choose it and it sticks with you forever. It may not.
Exactly. Speaking of which, do you have any plans or particular aspirations for the future, near or far?
Oh, well, Claire, I have been in a little bit of a season of pause, just evaluating what's next in a very kind of, like I'm very intentional anyway, but doing business as usual has been the question for me right now. Do I continue to do business as usual? And it is a season for me to make some shifts. Last year, my word was shift. And it definitely led me to some things where I'm like, okay, do I continue to do this? If I could just, side note, when we make changes, it doesn't mean that something is bad or good. It's just different. Sometimes something lovely can be in your life for a season and you either outgrow it or it just doesn't fit anymore. And that's okay. We grow and we no longer fit. Think of a baby, right? They wear the 3 to 6 months and then they wear the 6 to 9 months and then they wear the 9 to 12 months, right? Well, we're emotionally and psychologically, hopefully, growing out of each one of those fits, if you will, and it's okay. So I am in a decision-making process right now of what needs to go, not because it's bad, but because it's time. My phrase for this year, and I used a phrase, it kept coming to me, which is what if? What if? What if it works out? What if I try and I don't like it? What if this is the thing? I don't have finishes for the whole what if, but it's going to be the anchor that I use when I come up to a new decision or I come up to a new opportunity. You know, instead of yes or no, it's going to be, okay, what if this is a great opportunity for me? What if I only do it once? So for me, Claire, what has been business as usual is shifting at the moment. So creativity is definitely shifting more to more time toward art. That's the definite yes. But in order to make that time, I have to release a couple of things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely understand. Moving on, though, how can people connect with you, Gina?
At the moment, at the time of this recording, I am still actively doing my podcast, which is Feminine Roadmap. You can find it on all podcast platforms. And there's so many wonderful people in there. You can also find me on Instagram at Gina_R_Farrar, which is F as in Frank, ARRAR. And I will be documenting my journey there. The goal is to figure out how art can be the next journey of my life, sharing it with other people, getting myself out there. So that right now is the best place to find me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Gina. It's been brilliant chat.
Thank you for having me on, Claire. It was so nice to spend all that time on my show and then to come back and be on your show and talk about something we're both so passionate about, you know? I think we did actually spend like an extra hour off recording on my podcast because this is such an exciting thing. And if I could say one more thing is just be willing. What if you try it and you like it? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be good. The point of creating is to create. It's to express. It's to put yourself out there and feel something and do something just for the sake of doing it. No one else has to see it. No one else has to like it. Creativity is something we do for our soul. And if someone else appreciates it, great. But you know what? Creativity is for us.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thanks so much for listening to Creativity Found. I hope you enjoyed this episode and gained some value from it. If you did, perhaps you'd like to contribute a small monetary sign of appreciation, either by becoming a regular supporter from as little as $3 per month, using the link in the show notes, or if you're listening on a value for value enabled app, such as Fountain, TrueFans, or Podverse, feel free to send a few sats my way. I also occasionally promote products that I personally use, so please use the affiliate link where relevant if you are buying from those fine companies. Thanks so much, I really appreciate it.